Welcome to Backstory and Beyond. My name is John Daniel, and I'm humbled to be your host, but I'm super thrilled to be here with Miss Celeste Warren, who is the founder and president CEO of Celeste Warren Consulting LLC. Now, we also know her as someone who spent a long time with Merck Corporation and did a lot of great work in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and many other things in human resources. Welcome, Celeste.
Well, thank you, John. Thank you for the invitation to be a part of your ecosystem, not just the podcast, but just being a colleague and a friend as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Celeste. Well, look, Celeste, Backstory and Beyond is intended to help people become their best through looking at their calling, their service to other people, their purpose, and what their peak human potential is. If there's any example of that, it would be you, Miss Celeste Warren. And I think key here is what makes that special for folks like yourself is you're always wanting to get better. And I think that's key here. So there are a couple things, just items I want to address. One, this will be a Backstory and Beyond series in the future because you have that much to share with the world. Secondly, we're going to share the content here with the IBC 2025, which is an international broadcast organization. And so we're just delighted to be part of that and to have you share your experiences here. Most important is your backstory. Please share a little bit about yourself, ma'am.
Well, I grew up in a very small steel mill town in Western Pennsylvania during a time that was the steel mills were still pretty big back then. And I was one of five children. My mother was the CEO, CFO, and COO of our household. And my father was the first Black teacher and principal in Western Pennsylvania and Eastern Ohio. And so every day at the dinner table, when my mother would ask my dad, "How was your day?" each of us got a lesson and a front row seat around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because my dad would say, "Here's some of the challenges that I had today, being the one and only
Wow.
during this time period." And then he would not just say, "Here's the challenges that I had," because he was a very disciplined man. Um, he brought us up to say, you don't just complain about something. You say, what can I do to impact change, to make it better? Not just for my situation, but for the situation for others like me. And that is something that has been ingrained in me since I was a child, sitting at the table, having that front row seat to history in the making. And so I learned a lot from my mom and my dad. My dad was that fortitude, had that quiet discipline, was one of the leaders of the National Urban League in the Shenango Valley where we were. And my mom was an activist in her own right. She was from Pittsburgh, from the heart of the city. And my dad was from the area where I grew up. He was from that small steel mill town. And so there was a fire and ice type relationship with them. My mom was very much attuned to when my dad would share what happened in his day, she
Mhm.
would be riled up and ready to go and this and that. And people from the outside looking in at our family and my mom think she was this quiet, demure woman. And it's funny because that she was not like that in our household and among people that we were very, very close to. So I have both of them in me. I have that fire, and then I have that quiet, also measured discipline as well. And I'm blessed to be able to have both of that. I was an athlete, um, a student athlete all through elementary, junior high, high school, and I was recruited for both basketball and volleyball in college. And I wanted to get out of Pennsylvania and Ohio. And I said, I want to be able, even at a young age, I wanted to see the world. I wanted to see different parts of other places and other than where I grew up. And so I ended up going to the University of Kentucky in Lexington on a volleyball scholarship.
Mhm.
And it really didn't occur to me I just turned 17 years old, and it didn't occur to me that I was going to the South. I was used to the inequities that were happening and was very much aware of them in Western Pennsylvania.
Mhm.
But and you learn in history and at school about the Civil Rights Act and all of that and all of the things that were happening in the South, but it didn't dawn on me. I was just so excited to go to college that it didn't dawn on me like you're going into the South, you're going into the heart of Dixie. And
Yes, indeed.
I learned at I think it was towards the end of the football season. And in college, football wasn't just a game; it was an industry. It was a social event and everything. And so I remember being at the football game, and they were singing this song, "My Old Kentucky Home." They
Mm.
actually sang that just after they sang the alma mater and the fight song. And I wasn't aware of this song and the historical impact of it. And I'm sitting there with my friends, and they weren't singing it, and I didn't know the words to it, so I didn't really understand the historical reference of it. And they shared with me, what it was. And there's a part there's a part of the song that says, "When all of the people are gay," and happy in that sense. And they were telling me that the original words to that was, "When all of the darkies are gay." And I was like, "What?" And there were some frat boys sitting behind us that were half drunk, and they actually, instead of saying people, they said darkies. And I remember turning around and was like, "What is going on here?" And it wasn't until I met people outside of the athletes, the student athletes, who were all out of towners, out of staters
Right,
like me,
right, right.
that was sort of who I was around for, especially the first semester during the season. And even though I was traveling through the Southeastern Conference, the South, LSU, Mississippi, Ole Miss, Georgia, Auburn, we were on the bus or on the plane, at the hotel, at the sporting event, back to the hotel, back on the bus or plane, and then back to Lexington. So I didn't really explore the South in that way. We didn't go outside of that sort of pattern. But when I met people, students from Kentucky, Black students from Kentucky who lived there and were at school, that's when I learned, like, okay, yeah, I'm in the South. So it was quite an experience. That's sort of the formative years of my childhood and young adult life. And so it just, I saw more inequity. I saw more uh, instances of diversity and inclusion being abused and not people being excluded and being marginalized and doing it like it was okay. It was like, whoa.
Let me reflect upon what you said so far,
Yes.
because your mother and father understood clearly that faith without work is dead. And
Yeah.
they were willing to be an example to you of what an equity ambassador should be. Doing the right thing, to quote Spike Lee. At the end of the day, too, the mind body experience that you had as a scholar athlete allowed you, along with what your parents shared with you, to build the resilience that one needs to be an equity ambassador and quite frankly to be a black descendant of a slave in America. And this isn't just in America, it's all over the world. But we find ways to build relationships with people. And I'm kind of flip here a little bit
Mhm.
before we go on, because I want to really emphasize that you are a published author. And your most recent book, The Truth About Equity, is dynamite. I read it from cover to cover, and I'm continuing to learn from it. And so I think there's a byproduct of all the things that you've talked about in your backstory so far. And that's the ticket. What is it we go through that gives us the breakthrough? So I'm gonna shut up and let you continue with your backstory, please.
Oh, you're absolutely right. It's just ingrained in me, absolutely ingrained throughout college, throughout my graduate school, because I was a reporter initially. I
Ah,
went to school to be a reporter. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a sports reporter. I wanted to be, you remember when Robin Roberts was on ESPN
absolutely.
and that's who I wanted to be. I was like, I want to be on ESPN and this and that. So I was a reporter and went to school for television journalism and telecommunications. And when I got out, um, I worked at WVLK, which was the largest radio station in the state of Kentucky, and the voice of the Kentucky Wildcats. That's what it was. And so, but I didn't make a lot of money. I didn't make hardly any money. Um, I 10% of the people in that industry make 90% of the money, and the other 90% of the people make 10% of the money.
Hmm.
And unless you're in major markets, you know this, that those are the ones that make the big salaries. And so I'm trudging along and I got tired of writing home and asking my parents for my rent. I'm supposed to be an adult. I graduated from college. I'm supposed to be an adult and I had to write home and I could never make ends meet. And so I got my first interview for the ABC television station in Lexington. I interviewed and I got the job. And then I got my contract for the role. And I was so excited. I was like, oh, I'm on my way, on my way. I got my first television job. I opened up the letter and read the contract, and it was just a little bit more of what I was making as a radio personality. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was totally disillusioned. I went through mid career crisis. So I'm in my 20s, mid 20s. And I'm like, what do I do? I just felt stuck. I was so disillusioned. And my older sister, who was in Pittsburgh, she talked me into going to grad school. She said, well, you want to change your career? Just go back to school, go to get your master's degree in something, and then pursue your career. So that's what I did. I ended up coming back. My mother talked me into coming back home. She called me the prodigal daughter. She said, you're going to end up somewhere away from home. We know that you have that spirit in you, that spirit of, getting out. Um, so come to Pittsburgh for 2 years, your master's degree, be close to home, and then you can go wherever you want after that. And so I got into Carnegie Mellon University,
Hmm.
was introduced to human resources, and interned there at General Foods and was hired there afterwards, and worked. My first job in HR in that field was in White Plains, New York, at the General Foods headquarters, and then I went to Hoboken, New Jersey, and did labor relations in a plant where it was primarily second generation Sicilians, and there was a little bit of the undercurrent in the union of in the union population there, and so it was quite an interesting experience. But That's what started me into human resources, changing my career and going back and getting my master's.
This is really powerful, and it really underscores the need to be flexible
Yeah.
and understand that the disruption that
Mm-hmm.
comes from how systems operate and impact your ability to take care of yourself is
Yeah.
very important. And that's quite frankly where we're at today with disruption because it impacts how people can do business. It could be a supply chain if I have a tariff. It could be whether or not I can get the appropriate materials to fill my Cisco equipment in my data center. All these things play a role, but as a human being, growing, learning, you were implementing these kinds of skills that, quite frankly, corporate America needs right now,
Yeah.
particularly the aspect and the sector of media because media is going through massive change with technology. It's going through massive change with some of the things you just talked about relative to pay. What should I go to pharmacy school or should I go to journalism school? Where am I going to make my money? And where are the people who are going to actually do the business that have to be done? But I think key in all this is coming out of how you managed problems and it's relevant to today. So zipping forward a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
how did you end up at Merck Pharmaceutical?
Well, it was very, very interesting. I was down in Jacksonville, Florida, and I had been transferred there from Hoboken to a Maxwell House coffee plant facility. And they were going through a major restructuring. So they were actually literally gutting the plant, the coffee plant, and putting in state of the art computerized systems and lines and all of that. And I was brought down there I to head up labor relations and also training, learning and development. And the engineers and they were all talking about, we have to do this, we have to do that, we have to do this, we have to do that. And I said, well, that's great, but you know that the people still need to be able to run the machines. And the average grade of the employees at that time, the plant was 40% African American. The average age, I'm sorry, the average age was like about 50, and the average education was sixth grade. And so I said, we have to make sure that we are preparing these folks to be able to run this state of the art computerized machinery. And so I put together a strategy, learning strategy, and then had to negotiate it with the union and everything. And we were able to really successfully start the plan up with the people who were there because I did not want them to lay off people because they didn't have the skill set. So that was something that it was just a great accomplishment for me. And all of a sudden, Merck, a headhunter started calling and said, "Hey, Merck is getting ready to expand its human resources team in the U.S. market.
Mhm.
Would you be interested in interviewing?" And I didn't know anything about pharmaceuticals, John. I was like, "Where's Merck?" And so I called my younger sister. At the time, she was working for Pfizer,
Oh,
and I
okay.
said, tell me about this Merck. This headhunter called me and said, should and invited me to come and interview. And she said, absolutely go and interview with Merck. It's the creme de la creme of the pharmaceutical industry. You need to go there and you need to interview. And here she is working for a competitor, and she told me that. And
Wow.
so I went and interviewed and got the job. At the time, as I said, it was part of an expansion.
Right.
And there were 18 at the time regions across the United States that each of us were going to. Everyone, we were part, and we had a 2 week orientation session in Pennsylvania. Came up for that. Everyone knew where they were going except for me. They still hadn't assigned me to a region yet. And so it's so funny because you talk about resilience. Resilience is probably a key in my career. Starting with, when I changed careers completely, and then accepting a job and not knowing where in the United States I was going to be living.
Wow.
And so just packed up my stuff from Florida, put it in storage, and went to the orientation. The first week, still didn't know. And wasn't until the beginning of the second week that I was told, we're going to put you in the Richmond region, and in Richmond, Virginia. And that region was one of the most diverse regions in the company at that time because it entailed Delaware. It stopped right below Philadelphia, and it
Hmm.
was Delaware all the way down 95, Delaware, Maryland, DC, Virginia, West Virginia.
Right.
Really diverse area of the country. You have the urban areas of Baltimore and DC, and aspects of, Delaware, to the rural areas of Virginia and West Virginia, and putting together strategies for that region. And it was the bottom of the barrel. Out of all the 18 regions, that region had been totally and completely neglected. There was reductions, there was vacancies, there was a new regional sales leader who came in the same time I did, and an analyst. And we sort of came together and said, okay, we have to put together an integrated strategy to see how we increase this level of performance of this region.
Right.
And after a year, about a year and a half, we went from the bottom, number 18, to the top tier regions. And that integrated strategy, business, people, how do you optimize the level of people to get to the level of performance that you need? And so that's how I ended up in Merck.
That's awesome. And the reflection that I have now, having listened to that, and the other part of your backstory is, and I want to ask the question,
Hmm.
looking at the media, which you're familiar with because you worked in the media, we know it's going through a massive transformation right now. And many of the things you just described at Merck in terms of the people, the processes, the infrastructure apply to what's happening in broadcast right now. Um, if you were able here to kind of compare and contrast your work with human resources and what's needed for this transformation, I just love to hear it because without people, technology doesn't work.
Absolutely. Sometimes leaders think that if I just say so, it'll happen.
Mhm.
And especially in this day and age where we are right now, the Generation Z, the Generation Y, even Generation Z, um, it's a different mindset. It's an indifference to authority.
Mhm.
It's a You put your pants on one leg at a time, just like I do, Mr. CEO or Mr. VP or Mr. SVP. Um, you're no different than me. And that indifference, that sort of, I guess it's just in a way, it's innovation, creativity, and we have to make sure that we're cultivating it and not shoving it down. And so, from the standpoint of where we are right now, and how we leverage people, I've seen leaders um, who ignore the fact that they have to demonstrate inclusive leadership skills
Mhm.
and capabilities. They have to demonstrate equitable leadership and practices. And they don't really understand that because diversity is differences in people, those you can see and those you can't see.
Yeah.
You have to surround them with a culture of inclusion so you're able to leverage those differences to a collective purpose, whatever that vision is of that organization. And then the equity are the acts that you put in place to get all those people who are in different places because of their skills, their capabilities, their life experiences, their cultures, their identities. What do you have to put in place to get them to that collective purpose? Those are the acts of equity that you have to put in place. And leaders don't understand that. So now add on too, I talked about the generations and the differences in the generations too, but also technology and the advent of artificial intelligence and generative AI and all of the different aspects that are changing how we think
Yeah.
as individuals. You know, it's scary, John, how you go on your phone and you happen to stop at you're scrolling and you happen to stop at an article that sort of sparks your attention, whatever it may be about. And the next thing you know, if you're on there for longer than 10 seconds, all of a sudden your feed is just changing as you're watching that. And all of a sudden, all of this stuff that corroborates or supports that article that you stayed on feed in. And so the role that media and broadcasting has played in all of that, and the role that I think they need to play, is to be able to be a voice of sanity in all of this noise, because you it's added to the divisiveness. Because if I'm only getting, because of the algorithm, articles and clickbait that substantiates what I believe because of what I'm reading and where I'm choosing to learn about things, then the person who doesn't think the way I do has an all different algorithm that's coming in their space. And it's just, there's a division that's just natural throughout technology, unfortunately. Then add to that the misinformation and then the strategic disinformation that's happening. We have to have a media has got to play a role that says, here's the truth. And, I go back to Walter Cronkite, right? Back in the day, if Walter Cronkite said this is it, then you believed it, right?
Like John
Now,
Kennedy. He didn't say John Kennedy was dead until
yeah,
he knew
yeah.
it. I get you. I receive you.
And that was just, back then, that's how it was with our three or four or television stations. But now, we have to get to a place where we know the truth, and it's unfiltered, it's unbiased, and it is the truth. And we have to get back to that place. And the broadcasting media and industry, they've got to help us to get to that truth. And it's hard. It's hard because they have to make money to keep their doors open. And the clickbait and the likes and the people, returning to their articles, that's what keeps their doors open. And so I get it, I understand it, I lived it for the earlier part of my career. I had stories that were shut down for business reasons, and that was at the advent of AIDS coming in. And so I know, even way back then, decades ago, there was that piece of it. But now, it's multiplied on a humongous scale with 24-hour news feeds and all of this. It's so much more amplified. And so I would say that, with this change that's happened over the decades and over, especially very quickly over the last 10 years, we have to have a sane voice in all of this, that people, a sane and trusted voice, and do it in a way that, we understand you have to mitigate risk from a business standpoint. We know that that exists, and that's part of the industry. But we also know that you don't want to lead people astray purposely. And I think that's where the role that the broadcast media can play now.
It's important. That leadership role is very, very important. And the concept of being inclusive also says you have a moral compass.
Yeah.
That you want to see the light that's in every human being. And that person who also applied for that job, needs to have an understanding of their calling,
Mm-hmm.
their skill sets. If we're misplaced, it's a problem. One of the things that resounded with me as you were speaking about, for lack of a better word, the team, the team. That's a quote from Tom Brady, multiple time Super Bowl champion. And he was a subject of a documentary done by Gotham Chopra, looking at really what the essence and character was that makes for these iconic athletes.
Mm-hmm.
And when asked, he said, "Look, I'll be the guy on the podium that the media wants to talk to, but I couldn't be successful without a defense or an offense. The team, the team, the team." Uh, how in your mind do we, and I know you've done it already, but how do we emphasize that to our leaders to better understand some of the elements of what you talked about in diversity and equity as an action and an inclusive culture? How do we do that?
You have to speak the language that leaders understand. And a long time ago, I was in the chief diversity officer role for 10 years and in human resources for decades, even before in different companies. And one of the things that was in one of the tools in my toolkit was the power of being able to make an impact and influence.
Hmm.
And what I learned at an early age and sort of refined throughout my career was being able to influence. And how you did it was you need to basically understand who you're talking to,
Hmm.
understand what keeps them up at night, how they see running their business, what's important to them.
Right.
And once you understand that and you're working with a leader, once you understand that, then you say, okay, what are the interventions that need to take place in order for them to achieve the goal that they have? And that's kind of how I would think about how I did it when I was in human resources and trying to influence in the people space because I considered myself a business leader. My field of expertise was around optimizing the level of performance of people.
Hmm.
And so when I went from a human resources generalist, a business partner, leader, to a specialist in diversity, equity, inclusion, it was the same skill set, but it was huge. I had to do it on steroids
Right.
because not everybody, you got people on the human resources side that felt as a leader and manager, they'd say, well, look, that's HR's job to help to manage the people and put all that people stuff together, but they didn't realize that it's their job, and so we had to, so there was a lot of influencing and impact that you had to make sure they understood that's your job to lead and manage people. I'm going to provide you with the coaching, the resources to be able to do it, and but that's your job to optimize, the level of performance. And so when I got into DE&I, you had people, some people were very passionate about diversity and inclusion.
Right.
Some people were my fence sitters where they weren't getting in the way, but they weren't actively helping us to do the work. They were benefiting from it, but they weren't actively helping us. And then there was about a 10% that couldn't even spell the words diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so, you know, you talk about having to really um, stress the impacting skills. In that job, I had to do that, and people just did not see the importance. Like they saw it as a moral thing to do, and that's great. But
Right.
with a lot of leaders, that isn't what's on their mind. They're not being and understanding the importance of inclusive leadership, of servant leadership. They
Hmm.
don't understand that.
Right.
They're thinking about their business. They're thinking about how many widgets I sell, how many this I need to get out, all of that. And so, what I had to learn to do in those first few years I was in the job was how do I help them to understand that this is good for business,
Hmm.
that if they are able to integrate diversity, equity, and inclusion into their business strategies, they will be able to create a competitive advantage for their organization.
Hmm.
And so that's what I had to help them understand, because you have to appeal to the heart and the head. And for a lot of folks, if they don't have that heart, they don't have that
Right.
passion for it, they're
Right.
just strictly thinking about their business, then I had to basically get into here and tell them how it was going to make them more of this. And then after that, when they got it, the heart piece started coming out
Right.
because they were connecting with their people.
This is powerful. What we're talking about is transformative leadership.
Mhm.
And there's a body of evidence behind this that speaks of transformation zones. And Brother Gary L. Brantley, who is now the Chief Information Officer of the National Football League and has been there for a few years now, had to implement all the things you're talking about. Now, I want you to think about this. He went into the NFL that's making money hand over fist. And he's saying, we're going to be data driven now. And people are saying, well, we're doing fine just without anything else changing. But he went to each of the boroughs of the NFL and did exactly what you talked about. Got to know what was important to the people and explained to them the business case, the return on investment they would get if indeed they made a few changes.
Mhm.
Now the NFL has avatars, it's all over the world. There are things happening with flag football with young boys and girls. I
And
mean,
girls,
it
yep.
really has expanded because of the ideology that you just shared. So it makes me think optimistically, there's a chance here because people are doing this in big business sectors. And so I think it's imperative that the the body of information that you've put together over your years in your career is something that should be a part, number one, of the series we're talking about. But number two, that could actually go to the street, boots on the ground in the street. You have some ideas about that, Miss Celeste Warren?
I do, I do. You know, it's very interesting. After the election, with all of the work that people had put in, especially the 92%, the Black women, had put in going out and going door to door and mailing campaigns and all these different activities, and to really, in their words, to save democracy,
Hmm.
to basically say, we know that we have to do this body of work. And then when things turned the way they did in November, it was tiring, it was exhausting. I mean, it was, you just felt this overwhelming sense of defeat. And so I was the same way. I was just, I need to step back. I just need to, I'm tired. I just need to step back and I need to take care of myself, sort of rest for a bit. Now, for me, that rest only lasted a few months,
Hmm.
because as soon as January 21st came around and all of the executive orders and everything, I had to get up off the couch mentally and emotionally and get to work,
Right.
because there needed to be a preservation of the work that we were doing for decades and decades and decades and decades, and then arguably in centuries. So for me, I had to um, get back to work, get my head back in the space. And even though I was still a little bit tired, I still had to get there, because it
Right.
wasn't just for me, it was for everyone.
Right.
It was for everyone. And so um, I think that there's still, at this point where we are now, there
Mhm.
are still a lot of folks who are still, I'm just still going to take this respite. I'm still going to be resting. I'm still going to pull back. I'm not going out. I'm not doing the active activism. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. They're starting to peek their heads out from under the covers.
Right.
But I feel that we need to put the fans down, keep the boots on, and go from the dance floor and get out on the streets, because we're getting to a point now where the midterms are coming up. 2026 is a very crucial year. We have to do some work to educate people, to get them out to vote, to get people to understand what the issues are.
Mhm.
And, not just from a political, right versus left and all of that, but educating people on what the issues are, what's at stake, what we need to be doing, where we are now as a nation, and an impact that that has on the nation, on the economy, on everything that's happening to different people
Mhm.
all over the country, and then also the impact of the policies globally and where we stand. So regardless of where you stand, which side of the aisle that you're on, we got to get back, and we got to start getting back on the street, and we have to really do some work. And that's just sort of thoughts from Celeste. um, we got to get to work. We got to take this to the streets.
I love it. I love it. I just have a few more questions. I want to respect your time too. I know you got plenty to do. Um, and I'll just tell you what they are up front. If there's anything we missed that we haven't covered that you want to share, I want to have the opportunity for you to share that. And as important as that is, I want to know, who do you want to become, Mrs. Celeste Warren? Who do you want to become with all the things you've accomplished? And I know we've kind of delved into some, but
Mhm.
the floor is yours.
Uh, I'm gonna keep on being a warrior, John.
Oh,
Um, I
you see those
feel
swords
I
behind me, don't you?
I see them. I see them. I think we have to put on the whole armor and get out there and really fight, not just for ourselves, but for those who feel they have, for whatever reason, lost their voice and don't feel empowered to be able to elevate their own voice. I've always felt that when I was working in corporate. I feel that even more powerfully now. And that's what I want to do. So, whatever stage, whatever opportunity that I'm able to take part of, I'm going to use that platform to be able to talk and be a sane voice in this world that we're in right now. That's what I want to be in the future, for as long as the good Lord gives me breath.
Taking it to the streets is also going to require using the media,
Hmm.
conventional and unconventional, as a medium to share the same information. There's nothing like being on the block with the family, with the kids. There's nothing
Hmm.
like that. But we know every one of those kids and family members has a phone in their hand.
Yes.
So the unique combination of putting all that together to influence and motivate people to want to have better information when they go to exercise their vote, or when they go to school, or when they go to church, wherever they're going, they need good information. So I'm with you 100% and I love it. Um, is there anything that you want to share before we get off here?
The only thing, John, is if you have the opportunity, please go out and get the book, The Truth About Equity, what it really is, what it isn't, and how and why everyone wins when we get it right. I hope that people are able to read it and start the conversation and dialogue, educate themselves, have that intellectual curiosity to say, I'm not going to just listen to the clickbait and the headlines and whatever the algorithm is putting on my feed. I want to understand the truth. I want to understand what it really is. So I would encourage folks to go on Amazon, or you can go on my website, crwdiversity.com, and also order a copy.
I love it. I did, and I really enjoyed. And I got it digitally because it's just easy to take anywhere I want to go. But it was a fantastic piece of work. Thank you Miss Celeste Warren, I appreciate you for taking some time. We'll be in contact because we're going to hit the streets and make some things happen. Blessings to you and your family. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, John.